YouTube, how's it going? Well, not too bad. Awfully hot during the days. I know because the air conditioning gets running a lot. And ceiling fan I end up having to run a lot. Oh. I don't know where that's coming from. Been doing a lot of that for the last week and a half or so. Anyway, new episode of Hermitcraft up. Link is of course in the whatchamacallit. And I have another fanfiction review. This one is a thing called Memories of Iron. And it's kind of interesting. It's actually fascinating. It's a crossover between a thing I'd never heard of. Well, I take that back. I had seen it mentioned, but I didn't know what it was until I read this and looked it up. It's a web serial called Worm. A crossover between that and Iron Man. Yeah. Pretty cool, huh? And I don't believe it's the MCU Iron Man. It's more like somewhere advanced comic thing. Anywho, in the original Worm web serial, which by the way, I've linked that in the description as well for those that have never seen it or read it or whatever, so that it's available for background information, which I've read a good part of it, and it's interesting. It's good. I read enough of it to realize it's a good story, and then I went back to Memories of Iron. In the original Worm story, you have it's an interesting world. When people have something that they call a trigger event, which is basically your worst day ever on the world, a serious, major situation, often a life-threatening situation, really, really, really bad, it causes somebody to, as they call in that world, to trigger, which basically activates or enables them to have some kind of superhuman ability or abilities. These people are referred to as parahumans. And of course, you know how it's going to work out. Most people with these abilities are bad guys in one kind, to one stripe or another, and a fair number of them take the heroic path in one form or another. And there's a whole lot of crap going on. Lots of players, and this whole thing takes place in a fictional town of Brockton Bay, Massachusetts, which, based on a map I saw on the website or a wiki somewhere, it looks like about an hour, maybe an hour and a half north of Boston. Something like that. It's about what it looks like, but it's somehow still within the state of Massachusetts. And you got some major gangs there, some major bad guys. The gangs are bigger players than ordinary because they have superhumans, they have parahumans in them, sometimes parahumans as the leadership, so on and so forth. Anyway, there's a whole lot of play here, a whole lot of stuff going on. And in the world at large, you have these things called Endbringers, which are disastrous things that, if their actions are not at some point stopped, it will literally mean the end of the world, because they come into an attack, they destroy a city, and then they leave for whatever reason. And yeah. So into all of this, you have a kid named Taylor Hebert. Now, she is your basic 15-year-old girl in school who is having all kinds of problems. And I mean, she's smart as all get out, but she's having all kinds of problems because of bullies, one of whom happens to be a parahuman. Yeah, although she doesn't know that at the time. Anyway, in the original story, she gets these three bullies get together, and over at the beginning of Christmas break, they fill her locker with a bunch of some of the nastiest, most vile stuff in the world. I mean, we're talking used feminine hygiene products, lots of, from many different donors, and all sorts of garbage like that into the bottom of her locker. After being off school for a week or like 2 weeks, first day back to school, she's at her locker. She notices the smell, of course, and she's opening it up to find out what these people have done to her again this time. And as the thing gets opened up, she gets hit from behind, stuffed into the locker, and the door closed. Spends many hours in there because these bullies have threatened everybody. Don't touch the thing, don't open it, don't let her out, don't talk about it, yada yada yada, the whole thing. While in there, she, of course, triggers, because the smell is horrible, the thing is disease-ridden. I mean, something like that qualifies as a biohazard, a major biohazard, and the whole kind of doing something like that deliberately could actually literally be considered bioterrorism. Yeah. So she triggers. In the original canon story, the power that she ends up with is the ability to control insects. Tens of thousands of them at a time, or even more. In this story, Memories of Iron, it goes a little bit differently. Because in this story, sometime before this trigger event happens, an entity in another universe, in another reality, a Marvel reality, or a Marvel alternate reality, let's call it that, a Marvel alternate reality, where an entity, a three-faced entity, I think it is basically looking over the result of a major battle. You see the ruins of what used to be New York. And buried in all of that is the last few moments of Mr. Anthony Edward Stark, having lost the battle against a Celestial. Which of course means the end of the world. This entity that is watching this decides something, because he sees the thing going on in that other reality with Worm and Hebert, excuse me. I see the name and my mind wants it to say Herbert, but it's not, it's Hebert. This entity apparently sees what's coming in that other reality and decides to change things up a bit. He takes the memories and intellect of Tony Stark, 43-year-old dying Tony Stark, wads it up into a ball of psychic energy or what have you, some kind of energy, and flings it. That ball of memories and intellect hits Taylor Hebert asleep in her bed. She wakes up screaming from Tony Stark's nightmares. And she has basically all of his memories. All of them. all the genius stuff, all the business, all the women. It's an awful lot to throw at a kid, huh? Yeah, but the intellect is there too. And so the locker incident goes differently. She ends up talking to her father about the whole thing. They plan some stuff out. The locker incident goes vastly differently. And she sees some huge potential because she's got all the memories of Tony Stark and his intellect, plus the fact that she's a stone genius to start with. So what does she do? Build a computer system, writes the beginnings of Jarvis, and starts working on the armor. First up, an arc reactor, only not built in a cave. Built from parts obtained largely from the junkyard. Or I don't know, I'm getting ahead of it a little bit. It's a very long, very involved story, 295,000 words in 36 chapters. It's a very, very, very good story. I strongly recommend reading it. However, in the point of fairness, I have to tell you, it is not a completed story. Sadly, it will never be a completed story because the author is no longer with us. That is a real serious crying shame. It would be awesome if somebody could complete that story, but you'd have to be able to put yourself into the author's mindset, or at least close enough to it to be able to pick up with where that story is now and where it's been, and continue it on to a logical conclusion. And you'd have to be a heck of a writer to be able to put yourself into that author's place and actually continue the story seamlessly without making it really painfully obvious that there's been a change of authors. Well, I tell you what, 36 chapters, 295,000 words, worth every single one of them. Very good, awesome read. Please check it out, link in the description. Thanks for watching, take it easy. I am out. Here's the TinFoilChef.